an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece. Episodes, let's see again. What episodes are we on here? 527 through 529. Landing at the Fishman Island, beautiful mermaids. Excitement blowout, Sanji's life under threat. And the Fishman Island will be annihilated, Charlie's prophecy. It says excitement blowout, but something in me tells me that the original title was something like Lust Blowout or something. In these episodes, well, the Sanji thing continues, just as Florian warned me it would. Not liking that any better. But Fishman Island itself is fun. It's interesting. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. What's up, bruh? If you're out there, hi. So, you guys, I'm just going to start things from the beginning instead of jumping into talking about like the particular aspects of certain things that, I'm going to keep them in context. But, y'all, the beginning of this episode, we start right where we had left off with this, like, weird, mysterious group of pirates that are, they're fishmen, but I think they are also pirates because they are affiliated with Arlogn. But the fact that Arlogn is still at Fishman Island kind of makes me wonder, like, how much of a pirate he really is anymore. Because the thing about being a pirate is that you don't, like, stay where you're born. You travel around and cause trouble. And it seems to me that what Luffy did in defeating Arlogn and not killing him, evidently, was that the dude just doesn't want to start trouble anymore because of the way he got absolutely pwned. And it's kind of funny in this scene, these dudes basically say, like, we don't know what to do with you, my guy, because we are technically on an opposing side because of Arlogn, but then you tried to help Hachi by, like, punching an Imperial dragon, which is just unheard of. So it sort of feels like you're back on our side, don't know what to do. So how about you join up with us, and as long as you become part of our pirate crew, it's cool. We'll just let bygones be bygones. I feel like asking him to join up with their crew, if Arlogn were actually here to see this interaction, he would not approve of this being one of the choices that Luffy is given. And, like, I may be wrong about that. Maybe, but it just felt for me like, this doesn't seem like something he'd want. I don't know. Maybe he would, because then Luffy'd be under his power, but, like, he wouldn't really. Not really. So at this point, our friend the octopus just ditches the ship and he flees the place. And it's like they are just so very close to actually getting where they need to go. And the ship drops and hits the sand and is basically the equivalent of run aground, except underwater. And it should be noted that, like, the way in which this bubble around the ship is shrinking is a really dangerous indication of the fact that they are losing air. And so this scene, they look so small in comparison to these sea monsters that are around them. Like, I was just like, couldn't one of these animals literally just swallow them? But maybe they're just not into eating wooden ships. So this is so funny because this guy is like, yeah, you're gonna join the Arlogn pirates, and what is it that Luffy says in response? He says something like, get lost, or yeah, right. I can't even remember. I'll get to that spot in a moment. But this dude who is talking to Luffy here, we've got to do a little bit of a chat about their overall look. So, the main guy talking to Luffy, imagine a banana with abs and put a little Orphan Annie wig on top of it. And that is this dude. There's other stuff happening too. A couple tattoos. I don't care. This dude's a banana. That's all there is to it. Then to his right is a guy who's wearing what feels a little bit like a traditional sort of Aztec costume. Like there's feathers and they're very dense coming off of his shoulders and off the top of his head. I'm not really sure. And apparently the guy in the middle is named Fisher Tiger. Hammond. New Fisherman Pirates Assassin Hyozu. Hyozu is a really interesting looking... So he's got kind of a dreadlocks thing going on with his hair. He's also got this gourd that he's carrying with him and this red lines across his cheeks and his nose that I think is meant to indicate that he's drunk. He's just a really... There's nothing about him for me that feels particularly fish-like. That Hammond guy, that dude looks like a fish. And then here is Casagon, is the dude who's got the sort of Aztec feathered look. So anyway, yeah, this is the point where he says, become part of the Arlogn pirates or else. And then he fills it in with, and the or else is, we sink you right now. As he says this, Nami decides that she's going to go over and start talking to Frankie about a different way to handle this, because she is correct in that you know that Luffy isn't going to take this sitting down. He's going to start a fight with these guys. He won't cooperate, and they are going to kill us. We have no oxygen left almost, and he's going to break the bubble, break the shell. Something's going to go wrong. And she says, we've come way too far to die here. And I kind of like this because our friends have become powerful enough that a lot of people just didn't even want to mess with them. But putting them in this setting means that even though they have individually grown a lot more powerful, they are still at the mercy of like nature with this water pressure and just drowning, like all of this. So it's a pretty effective way to make it so that their new abilities don't just make them so OP that nobody can fuck with them. And Robin, she is just like, yeah, I think Nami is right. This is really the only way that we're going to survive this. So Frankie, he pulls all of the sails up, and I love this dude, the drunk, just saying, those humans are starting to look awfully busy there. Don't you think? They're doing something. And Hammond says humans aren't that smart, so probably whatever they're doing, we can handle it. Yeah, okay, so Luffy says, yeah, right, you wish, and then says stupid after it. Amazing. It's just such a goofy response. I love it. So this guy's like, all right, well then you're officially our enemy, and that means that we are going to do what we do to humans to you. And Luffy, meanwhile, is yelling at them, why would I want to work for a dumb fish face like you? And is literally like pulling his cheeks out. And when I say cheek, like his face, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, so this dude is like, all right, we're going to attack. And they begin to charge. We jump over to Usopp, who has some canisters, some barrels lined up, and he's like, all right, we're doing it. Let's go. Everybody on the deck is like preparing for a fight in case they aren't able to, hit the gas to quickly enough. And then they take off in this sort of series. It's a coup de burst, but it's a way stronger one than usual. And they manage to blow right past that lion. But as they're going, because it's sucking air out of the coating that's on the ship, it's shrink wrapping them in place. It's like they're underneath the laminator and they're all just smushed down to the deck. And it is just a really, really fascinating way to deal with this. The idea that they could become physically trapped under the coating of the ship. I just think this is a really neat concept. Meanwhile, those other pirates out there are just sort of wait, how do they even do that? What's up with that ship? They hit another coating, the outside of the bubble, as they go into the Fishman Island area. Their own bubble comes off, and it gets trapped in with the one that they just crossed through. And as they're sailing through, it turns out this is double sealed. So the ship would normally just crash here because there's not water to support it. But because they plowed through at high speed, they're actually going to break through both of them, which is really, so we saw that there was an actual entrance at going through these bubbles, this giant sort of, it almost looked like where you would insert one of those needles from a pump to inflate an exercise ball, those, it almost was like that. And for a moment, I'm thinking well, then is that why so many people fail to make it? Because they don't realize? But I was oh no, where the entrance would probably be the way that most people went in. And it would be the way that they'd go in if they weren't accosted by these pirates this way. So they go through it. And once they go through the second one, which is water, they have no coating on their ship anymore. And all of them start to plummet. And reminder, we've got a few devil fruit users here that can't swim. Once they're in this water, that's it. So we see Sanji, and of course, he's got his history with swimming, so he knows how. Of course, one of the first people that he saves is Robin. And he is realizing oh yeah, there's going to be a bunch of folks here who can't swim. Meanwhile, Zoro is just shit. And he says reach. And I was thinking that he was trying to grab somebody, but we don't see him reaching in the same way that we see Sanji doing. And the current, there's a current in this that is apparently quite strong. And so it's pulling them all down in this vortex. And I was just wait, where does it go? Because the place is inside almost a fishbowl. So where does the current even head? Do you know what I'm saying? I didn't really understood how this functioned. Then we go out to the pirates who are just well, I guess that's one way to get in. They seem almost impressed, at least the sort of Aztec looking guy. I am so sorry, guys, by the way. I will not remember their names, so good luck to me. But we're going to call him the Aztec, the banana, and dreadlocks. So yeah, Hammond's well, we can still get them even in there. And Dreadlocks is I mean, we can if you want, but we don't even know if they're still alive. So I don't know, whatever. But Hammond says we can't let Neptune's army get their hands on him first. And later on, we find out about King Neptune and that he is a sea god, which, that's also Ariel's name. And there is a very sort of under the sea vibe. I don't mean just literally under the sea, but I feel it's when I compared it earlier to expecting something from Little Mermaid, I am getting more of that than it looked like I was going to get. And, so Fishman Island, on the way that this place is set up is sort of confusing to me because everything is underwater technically, like the buildings, but it seems like there's air inside the apartments themselves. Excuse me. I have the hiccups. But yeah, the way that this works, it's a little bit, the little girls that wake Luffy up, for example, the way that they are swimming through the air is that they are sort of all wearing a inner tube of air around their waist. Almost like they were able to make bubbles like they have at Sabaody, but fashion them into something else. So it's a weird thing where there's like only water in this certain area, but even in the places where there isn't water, our friends with fishtails can function as if there were water. And so I get a little bit like confused every now and then about what setting we're actually in and how all of this works. So here comes the cute green-haired mermaid that they had met before. And apparently she was able to like scoop them all up and rescue them. And it's there's a weird moment where she's like saying, I'm sure that you guys are all cold, so I made you some cold seaweed soup. And they're all like, wait, cold? And she just, I can't tell if the joke is going to be like a running joke about how she's really bad at cooking, or if it's that she's sort of ditzy, or what's going on. I didn't get ditzy from her really the first time we met her. Kami, that's her name. But yeah, so she's the one who has like all of these little girls here. Fucking Sanji, of course, is like, oh my god, you're even lovelier than you had been. Marry me. And Luffy says, wait, if Kami's here, then we made it to the island after all. But as it turns out, our friends got separated already. So we have gotten here and instantly separated. And I was just like, oh my god, this is just not fair. So yeah, Luffy is talking to her and he says, this is your house? And she's like, yeah, I know that I was supposed to pick you guys up on Sabaody, but I thought that was another month from now. I don't remember her being part of this at all, to be honest. I guess, like, I don't know. I don't. Oh my god. And I'm realizing that she's actually floating in water because there's water, like, up to the edge of her counters and stuff. So it's almost like there's a pool that is the floor. And then the bed that everybody is sitting on, which is of course a giant like oyster shell, clam shell, is floating on top of that water. I'd totally forgotten this. But yeah, so they begin to sort of understand the gravity of them all being separated and really hoping that like the other ones manage to get out of it, but they don't really know what happened. They're not even entirely sure how they got here with Kami at this point, you know? And Sanji is like, well, I think that if Frankie and Mosshead, of course, is the way he says it, and Zoro are with the others, that they may be okay. So here comes the weird thing with the seaweed soup, and Sanji takes some and is just insisting that it's like the most delicious thing he's ever tasted, and that it's definitely warming him right up. Then we get these girls bringing the laundry. You guys, this is so funny. So they each speak in turn, and it's like the same rhythm every time. There's the positive one. Your clothes are dry, everybody. And somebody else just says in a neutral way, they're dry. Then the third one, who is upset, no, they're not dry. And then another says, your clothes might be dry. And then the fifth one says, who cares if they're dry? And this is how they respond every time. You get somebody who's positive, somebody who's neutral, somebody who's negative, somebody who's uncertain, and then somebody who's just like a nihilist. And this is actually working quite well for me. I think that this is genuinely funny. There is something about all of them, like with their differing responses in any given moment, followed by the one who says, who cares, or so what? And honestly, so what? Let's bring so what back. I love so what. That really was a thing, and now nobody says that the same way. And I feel like it really encompasses a certain vibe that other phrasing doesn't quite do. You know, like if you say something and then somebody responds with, and, that is them saying, I expected a particular outcome, or at least a continuation of the story, and I'm not getting it. But if somebody says something and then you say, so what? It's not about like, you need to tell me the cause or the effect. It's like you just saying, what you've told me is utterly irrelevant. Even if it were relevant, it like really wouldn't be. I want to know what the point was of even telling me the story. And that's just sometimes how I feel about things, to be honest. But yeah, so it does turn out that their clothes are actually dry. So the first one was correct. I'm not sure if it's going to be that the one that's positive tends to always be right, or if the one that's like, the one that's the first to speak is just putting the best spin on things. I don't know. I'm not going to bother learning all their names, by the way. There's 2 Yonkos. That's all I need to know. But yeah, so this is when Kami says, I've got a lot of neat friends here, actually. And she says that this is the sea floor, and it's the home of the girls' dorm and the mermaid cafe. So Sanji says girls' dorm, and he has to really, really take a moment. Both Usopp and Chopper are just like, oh God, oh no. He really tries to restrain himself, and he's like, well, what about the mermaid cafe? And Kami says that she works there and, you know, has made a lot of cool friends here. Later on, he actually meets some of them, and it's just as good as he had hoped for. He's like, I promised myself I wouldn't get a nosebleed here on Fishman Island. I'm not going to do it. And he's like really trying to maintain control of himself. At this point, Kami is like, well, why don't we go out and pay a visit? And there's this cool elevator that's on the back of a sea turtle. And the sea turtle's got a little helmet. You guys, it's a little helmet and a little whistle as he like lifts into the air. This is adorable. This is precious. I love it so much. As they are ascending, Kami explains that the bottom is like the low income area. That's why that's where the dorms are. And she says the top floor is most expensive because it gets natural light, which we still haven't really established how there's so much light down here. And, you know, the sun couldn't penetrate this far. So where's that light coming from? She says natural light, not sunlight. So I'm assuming that there is some sort of glowing substance down here. I don't know. And they ask about where Hachi's living. She says that he got beat up real bad about a year ago. That was what we know about from him guarding the ship. And she says he came from the Fishman district, so that's where he's been resting and recovering. I haven't had the chance to see him lately, but from what I hear, he's getting better all the time. But it is kind of a rough part of town. I wouldn't mind going to see him if you guys were with me. So she hasn't been to see him because she's sort of worried about it. And then there is Papagoo. And I am so sorry, kids, but that name, not good. And she says he's a super famous fashion designer. So he lives in a big fancy mansion in the high class district of Fishfully Hills. Fishfully Hills. Oh my God. Luffy says, wait, he's your pet. Don't you two live in the same place? And she says, yeah, that area's a little out of my price range. Papa Goo, the fact that you hit it big and Kami has been your person and you haven't shared the wealth with her at all. Not that she's living in squalor or anything. Her apartment seemed perfectly cute. But why would you just not share any of your success with her? Sir, what the fuck is that about? I was annoyed. And this is just how I am, though. If the podcast were to suddenly get super successful so that I wasn't living like paycheck to paycheck, the first thing that I would do is increase the amount of money that I am paying the couple of people that I am able to pay. And that's just people who actually work with me. Never mind like friends who, of course, I would help so often. It's just, I don't think much of a character who hits it big and then leaves their friends behind like this. Not that he needs to just straight up pay her rent, but if he's got a mansion the size of the one that we see later, he could straight up pay her rent. Apparently. That's the kind of success we're talking about. I make after taxes and my expenses for the show, I make about 35 grand a year. And that's a good year. That's kind of on the higher end. If you suddenly saw me jump to making 100,000 a year, let's say, and that's not even what he's living in, would be much more than that, I think. But there's no way that I don't start paying Rashawn at least triple what I'm paying her now, at least. Anyway, it bothered me, you guys. It just bothered me. I love when Usopp is like, what's that, tube over there? And she explains that it's like a water road and it has a really particularly strong current. So you can pop in there and get drawn extra quickly to wherever it is you're going. What it kind of reminded me of was those moving walkways that they have in airports, So they wind up surfacing, and when they surface, she waves to them and we see that this tube goes through the sky. And that way they're able to continue swimming in this way. But the thing that I appreciated that this is actually acknowledged, the weirdness of this place being underwater but still having a sky with clouds. It's so, I don't feel like this ever actually gets explained in these episodes. It may in the future. But Usopp definitely is sort of wait, how is this possible? So this is the point where we get to see all of the girls that work at the Mermaid Cafe. And of course, they are universally hot. There is not a single mermaid here that has that really intensely masculine look that some of the women on Maiden Island are given. All of these mermaids have the exact same body. And mostly, let's be real, the same faces as well. It's just they're given different colors of hair and different colored eyes. Maybe their eyes are tilted and slanted in different ways. That's sort of the only thing. And y'all, this moment, this show gets so much more explicit about stuff than I expect it to. He's looking at all of them, and we see the animation zeroes in on his crotch, and we see sparkles around it, as if to signal that he's getting a tingly in his bits. Or maybe getting an erection. I don't know. Sanji literally begins crying. And he runs forward and sobs. And then collapses. Luffy is he didn't even cry this hard when he left the Baratier. And he says, finally, I found my all blue after all these years. This isn't the all blue, sir. Are you going to cook and eat these girls? I feel like that's not what you're talking about. why would you think that? Why would you even say that? This is just a weird response. So Kami comes up and she introduces all of them. And then again, one of the mermaids asks Sanji, "Why are you crying? Come over here. Let's dance in the water together." She takes his hand and starts to pull him toward the water. And he then says, "Okay, I get it. This is obviously too good to be true. Maybe I'm destined to die today." And Usopp just jumps in and says, "That's dark. What the hell happened to you?" Oh my god. This is delightful, honestly. As much as Sanji is so irritating, this situation itself feels built explicitly for his, like, fantasy dreams. You know, like, all of these girls all being very, very hot and apparently, like, kind of flirty as well. Like, we see the way they act with him later, and they are really playful with him and not the kind of reserved and, like, why are you acting this way that a lot of women would be. So the episode ends with us going to the Fishman district, which is, like we heard, Hachi is there, and it's not a great area. And we see the Arlogn pirates talking to, I assume, Arlogn, based on the coloring of this, the arms that we get to see. I can't remember if we actually explicitly see his face, but it's pretty, like, clear with the teeth and everything. That's who they're talking to. I may be wrong. I feel like the subtitle said a different name, but I was like, this guy looks like him. I don't know. Is he going by a different name now than he used to, perhaps? That's what's going on? So the excitement blowout. Let's just talk about this. All right. You know what? First, I'm going to talk about Nami because we didn't check in with him at the end of the last episode. She's looking around and it's just like, I cannot believe I am this far underwater. Like, how does this work? There's ocean there. What is happening? And she's looking out and there's this, like, huge spout of water ahead, clearly, of something that is plowing through the water at great speed, coming straight for her. And she screams, understandably, like, I assumed that this was Frankie, but if you don't know that for sure, it does look like something is just trying to come and get her, you know? And he explodes out of the water and has Robin in one of his hands that he just saved because, again, she can't swim because of this dragon fruit. Oh my god. Devil fruit. So they are able to resuscitate her, and Frankie goes out to check in on the area and where they've wound up and what the situation is here. And he says, looks like we were all thrown in different directions. Zoro isn't here. And this had me going like, why do we have to leave Zoro alone out of all of them? That dude does not have the capacity to handle finding his friends all by himself. So Frankie points out that there is this town over there. And maybe there's a way that they can get some information, get some supplies, whatever. This is when we jump back to Sanji, who has stripped down to pants only and jumps into the water. And these girls, these mermaids, are gathered around him, absolutely welcoming. Like, they don't find what he's saying and doing to be freaky at all. I had sort of thought maybe the fact that they were, like, indulging him was keeping the blood issue from happening. That if there's an element of restraint that he keeps having to pull into play. And that might be causing like the pressure buildup to be worse, and that if he is allowed to just express himself completely, it might not happen this way. But apparently, as we see later, that's not exactly how this works. So let's see. Oh yeah, this moment with him jumping in the water. They play this a couple of times. I forgot that they reuse animation this way. But yeah, Kami is saying, well, Boss doesn't exactly live on the island with everybody else. She's talking about Jinbei, and she says that because he resigned from being a warlord, they have to treat him like a regular pirate again, which means that he can't just live in the city. So he had to find a new place to live that's not too far from here. But you'll want to go there if you need to see him. And Luffy is very irritated about this. That, you know, first of all, he feels like it's a stupid rule. But second of all, just like the extra trouble of like leaving this place after everything they went through to get here in the first place. So here come these 5 girls. There's a big ship coming, maybe. It's from the palace, yeah, but maybe nobody's on it. Don't be stupid. Of course someone's on it. So did you see somebody on the ship or not? No, not yet, but it was for sure the royal family's ship. They don't usually come around here. Maybe they've come here to arrest Luffy because he didn't enter the city the right way. So what if they do? I did find this funny. Can't help it, you guys. So this ship, it's so weird looking, you guys. It's built around a eel, I think it would be called. So like the eel has like ship's bodies around its body. And those ships, because there are people on them, are coated and have like a bubble. But the bubble doesn't extend all the way around the fish, or else they couldn't swim or breathe. So it's like, I'm trying to think of something that it compares to, and I'm really kind of drawing a blank here. But it's like they found a way to build in the guidance of a sea creature like our friends had with the octopus. But the ships are built explicitly with like a certain creature in mind already. And it just was so neat looking and unexpected. And I was just very like, I just want to see a little bit more of this. I just find this a really cool design, to be honest. She calls it the Royal Gondola. And one of the other mermaids is like, I don't think that the royal family would come down here, though. Like, it might be their ship, but I don't think that they are on it. I forgot that there's a tiny bubble on its tail as well, I guess to give it balance. I don't know. But the ship pulls up, and then somebody yells, "Attention all citizens, the 3 Neptune brothers have arrived." And you hear somebody say, "Greetings, ladies off the shore. I hope that you can answer an inquiry of mine." And all of the mermaids are just like, "Oh my God, they're here. Oh my God, oh my God." And they seem truly excited about this. Hearts rising off of them. And poor Sanji off to the side, seeing that his girls are paying attention to like other dudes. The heartbreak. He seems so bummed about it. Oh my God. He's just standing there with his eyes like doing that whited out thing that people do. So all of a sudden he gets like pulled away. And we have him waking up and being like, "Oh, what is my head on?" It's like the size of melons, but too soft to be a melon. It could be a marshmallow because it smells sweet, but it's too warm. And then he opens his eyes and looks up into the face of one of the mermaids, and his head is jammed between her titties. And this is just a little bit too much for him to handle. And he starts to really lose his mind. We jump over briefly to one of the, what do you call them? The princes. He's got a sort of like crescent on his head between his eyes. Like, he's a really neat design in some ways. He's got this periwinkle colored hair. And he is a shark merman. Then we've got one that is a oarfish. This dude doesn't look great. He's got these weird lips that are pulled away from his teeth in such a fashion that it looks like he couldn't close his mouth entirely. And the way his hair is done and everything is no good. And then we have this guy, the second son, named Mamboshi? Moonfish merman. This dude is just as much of a horn dog as Sanji. And he looks extra strange. There's like something almost clown-like about him. He's giving a little bit like Humpty Dumpty. And the whole like energy of these dudes, it's very much the two lackey brothers that follow around the hot and actually intimidating oldest brother. And they're looking for our friends. And the mermaids are just like, nope, haven't seen them. I'm surprised that you're giving them your attention to begin with, because they don't even sound that important. And the prince is like, well, we're not sure if they're worth our time. We haven't even got their identities yet. So this conversation is punctuated with the one brother like singing and the other one chanting about how they need to party with the ladies. A lot of repetition going on in the midst of all of this. Meanwhile, we have the other Arlogn pirates who are realizing that, like, oh, okay, the fucking princes are here involving themselves in this situation. So we're going to have to move fast if we want to get our hands on them before these guys do. The prince says, "We shall move on. Forgive us for interrupting your leisure." And they take off, and I was just surprised at how reasonable the prince was. I was thinking that he was going to be like a real playboy type, or even like somebody just looking for trouble, you know, he's just sort of spoiling for a fight, and he hears that somebody came in and didn't follow the rules, and he takes that as sort of a personal affront because it's an excuse to start some shit. But when he's like riding away on the ship, he actually says like maybe the guards only imagined it. So there's a sense of like he's doing his duty because this is what's expected of him and he has to follow up on these sorts of leads, but he isn't somebody who just craves confrontation and violence. He actually seems like kind of he apologizes for interrupting their leisure. I mean, that's very polite, you know? So I'm hoping that this dude turns out to be like an ally in the end. Anyway, this is the moment where Sanji's nosebleed really breaks out. And you guys, that nosebleed sprays into the air in a geyser in the shape of a mermaid, which I just loved so much. Meanwhile, this poor mermaid is just like, oh my God, what happened? She's got his blood on her, you know? And Luffy is like, oh my God, he's lost way too much blood. Like, this is a problem. We need to get him help now. And the prince turns because this geyser of blood got his attention. And he sees Luffy, and he's like, wait a second, that is him. Hold on. Compares it to the wanted poster. And he turns around and sends out his knights, who are wearing this very interesting outfit. Like, whenever you've got these sorts of backup characters, the design of their armor or their uniform is kind of important to me because I don't want them to seem ridiculous. I want them to feel like they're more threatening. And we have had some like truly goofy outfits before that I was like, I don't even understand what we're doing here. This is laughable. But and I'll go into more description with them later, but they have sort of like these snails as epaulets, which makes their shoulders way bigger. And there's almost something kind of like Roman looking about their outfits. And so I was like, okay, you know what? These guys are pretty good. Like, not a genuinely scary uniform, but a uniform that I could see you'd only make a couple tweaks and maybe it would be a lot more intimidating. I don't know. So anyway, we go back to Zoro here, or I say back to Zoro. This is the first time we've checked in with him, and he is wandering around, no idea where he's at, and is just like, everything looks the same. How am I supposed to get anywhere? And this is when these dudes turn up. Oh my God. I don't think I saw how their shirts are like open in the front the way that they are. It's a real weird look. Like, because the helmets that they're wearing have a visor on them that covers their eyes but comes to like a point, and it is actually kind of dope looking. It's almost like giving BMX, you know what I'm saying? But the shirts kind of look like this is going to be a very specific reference, and so probably most of you are going to get what I'm talking about, but if you don't, I wouldn't advise like looking it up. But what they kind of look like within these shirts is in porn. When male porn actors are wearing a sort of like long baggy t-shirt, what they'll often do is they lift the front of the shirt up over their head and then they let go, so that the shirt kind of drapes around their neck, but their arms are still through the sleeves. And that gets the shirt out of the way so that the camera can see more of both of their bodies. And this looks so similar, except imagine that the shirt was like really long, so it draped behind them like a cape, kind of. So yeah, like I said, it's like a weird combo of things. And overall, I think the only thing that you'd have to do to really make this look more intimidating is probably to like change up the coloring on the skirt part and remove those shorts from the equation entirely, because it does look like they're wearing straight up swim trunks underneath like a grass skirt. So this is when Chopper is like starting to yell to everybody, hey, we need some blood as like the blood compatible with fishmen to humans. And this is when Kami is like, she gets a sort of weird tone to her voice and expression on her face as Chopper is yelling about this. And Luffy also begins yelling about like how we can't just let my friend die. And Kami says, fishmen and humans do have the same type of blood, but the situation is complicated. The thing is, and then all of a sudden we hear Hammond laughing, and he has a real sort of ha, ho, ha. Like, it's a weird laugh. But he explains the situation. He says, you're not getting a damn drop of blood from anybody on this island. Why would we share our blood with disgusting creatures like you? Humans aren't worth a thing down here. And even if they were, decent fishmen like us who hate humans would make sure they were punished for it. He can bleed out right there for all I care. Many fishmen would happily watch him die. There's a law we followed for a long time. Fishmen are forbidden to share blood with humans no matter what. And I think it's Usopp who just yells that law sucks. But he says, after all, it was humans who set the rule in the first place. Our blood may be the same, but for ages you've treated us like monsters or worse, animals. Your blood was too good for us. That's why Fisher Tiger, the hero of this island, died. And this was a really interesting. He says he fought to free slaves of all races, and when that battle took its toll on his body and he lay there battered, not a single human deigned to return his kindness. A transfusion would have saved him. Because of humans, he died. So right now, you have but one choice. It's not much of a choice. Your friend is going to die, and you're coming to the Fishman District with me. And this was just a really interesting... So this is definitely, historically a thing where black people and their blood was separate from white blood. Then there was the whole, if you are gay, you aren't allowed to donate blood, which I believe is still in place even today. I'm going to Google this right now. Can gay men donate blood? Let's see. Under the FDA's individual donor assessment guidance, there are no eligibility criteria related to men who have sex with men. Okay. Oh my God. Guys, I'm all confident, oh, good. That seemed incredibly outdated, so glad to find it's no longer a thing. Do you know when it became no longer a thing? 2023, May 11th. It's been barely a year. That is fucking ridiculous. God, we are such idiots. That is so, oh my God, a year ago. This is so stupid. I can't even, I'm so mad now. I was really relieved a second ago, but then once I saw those numbers, I was just take it back. So anyway, this situation, it's just really, really interesting to me that they're sort of reaping the rewards of a system that was created by human beings. And, it do sometimes be like that, though. I am sure that there have been white people who rejected blood from black donors. I'm sure that's happened. Even now, you still get nurses talking about patients who refused care from them. If the nurse was black or the doctor was black, the patient didn't want to deal with them. Which just imagine being at a point where you need emergency care, but your prejudice runs so deep that you won't let a person who looks a certain way care for you. What kind of, ugh, gross. But yeah, he's I'm going to bring you back to my boss because he doesn't like to wait. And Usopp is well, who gives a shit about this rule? Somebody's life is on the line here, and you guys could just do what we're asking and ignore this man, making all of these, what's the word I want? Putting all of these restrictions on you. As he's saying this, all of the mermaids around them look really bummed because it seems like they are not going to be willing to sort of flout the established norms here. And I mean, I can't even get that mad at them when these guys are standing right here saying that they will execute anybody who does it. If one of them wants to donate on the sly, that's a different thing, but you're asking one of them to step forward and be willing to do this when more than likely they will be executed before they even get the chance to give the blood over, so it wouldn't help. But Kami, she winds up taking off, and when she comes back, she's scooping them up to take them somewhere else. But even the place they're going, she's not really sure if they're going to be able to get the help there that they're hoping for. We also get this wonderful moment of Luffy going into second gear and also using his haki to stop one of the monsters, and the prince watching him and just being super impressed. And again, just the prince is just sort of giving a good impression for me, He isn't trying to jump into the middle of this conflict either. He's just sort of observing as if he isn't an authority here that can step in and break it up. I don't really know if it's because he doesn't feel like he has enough men with him to compete with the number of pirates that there are, but I did sort of think that he was going to put his foot down between the two of them. And they're, watching all of this down on the ground, and all of a sudden Kami is like, hey, Luffy, I'm up here. And she has, like, taken the royal ship, doesn't feel like the right word. She called it something just earlier that I mentioned and I forgot already. But, she just takes off with it, which is so funny. And she just yells back, I'm sorry, guys. We'll bring your ship back as soon as we can save Sanji. I love Mamboshi. Away they go. And he's dancing around. The prince literally just watches them go and says, huh. And I will tell you what, that was so funny to me. I loved it. I really did. So, all right, I have a brief amount of time to talk about the next episode. But I'm going to try and hit the high points here. So, like I said, we're going into town and there's a sense of we don't even know if there's going to be anybody willing to help us here, but they get pretty excited when they spot a bunch of humans around, because that means that there are people that they're going to be able to potentially convince. I had been thinking, and I was so glad that this was dealt with within these 3 episodes, because when our friends come through the wall and get separated, I was very much wondering what was going on with Wet Hair Caribou, because we didn't see him and nobody is wondering about him. And I was sort of what is the deal? I know he wouldn't have drowned. And I even almost thought, did something happen to him in the previous episode that I forgot about? But eventually in this 3rd episode, we have the barrel turning up and a couple of these other mermaids looking at it and being well, what's in this? Should we open it? And one of them says, yeah, maybe. What if what's in it needs to go in the fridge? And I don't know why, but that was just the sort of mundanity of that statement was truly, that tickled me. And they gather around it. We don't actually see them open it, but we see them having the crowbar to start to pull the metal bracers off of it. Then we jump to our friends who are in the town with Sanji as he is waking up after this transfusion. And you guys, it's the worst. So Sanji, having recovered, has a moment of thinking that maybe it was hot girls who donated this blood to him. And Usopp is oh yeah, here are the people. Say hi and thank you. And the hand comes through that's waving to him with these long nails and long elegant fingers. And then, of course, as they come through, it turns out to be 2 dudes. They're not fully in drag because they're in regular t-shirts and stuff, but they have makeup on and they're flirting with him. And Sanji screams and begins running around. And you guys, considering this whole thing with gays not being able to donate blood until recently, this is just so incredibly gross. The whole, and Usopp is well, that's not exactly gratitude. And what bothers me about this is not just the fact that Sanji's intense bigotry is being used as a joke over and over again. It's also the fact that the 2 men who donated are just sort of props in the scene, but not reacting at all to the way that Sanji is behaving about them. And that really bugs me, that they're not allowed to express hey, we saved your life and you know that it's kind of fucked up that you're doing this, right? Like, what is wrong with you? Instead, it's almost like they are aware they're making him uncomfortable and they think it's funny and they're doing it on purpose. And there's something I really like take issue with in that aspect of the way they're being portrayed. If it were just him being a shit, that's already bad enough. But for them to like, it almost feels as if they're poking at him on purpose. I did not like this at all. So this is a point where Luffy gets his wound seen to by Chopper, and Chopper does a test and he's like, this wound is poisoned, but you're fine? How does that work? And he's like, did you ever get exposed to a poison in the past? And like, and he reminds them all of the encounter that he had with, oh my God, what is his name? Magellan. And I had forgotten all about the poison thing there. But yeah, so it turns out like he's got some sort of immunity to this poison now, which is wild. I don't think it seems to differentiate between types of poison either. It seems as if it's like just in general, his body responds to poison differently now that he has almost died from it. So let's see, I'm trying to see. Oh yeah, the guys got fucked up. The what do you call them? The pirates. And the drunk one seems to be the only one that's like conscious. He says, what's worse, Straw Hat got poisoned too. I'm dead if he dies. And you guys, it took me so long to understand. It's so embarrassing. I thought he meant somehow like the poison was magic. And that if something happened to Luffy, it would fuck him up too. But it's clearly just that he's been tasked with bringing Luffy to his boss. And so if he accidentally kills Luffy, that's going to be a fucking issue. But y'all, it really did take me way too long to like clock what he was really saying here. So this is when we go back to the mermaids that opened up the barrel. And we see that there are a couple that were nearby. The ones that opened it are missing. The barrel is in pieces. And the girls that are nearby are just like, hey, where did our friends go? But we don't actually see what has happened to fucking Caribou. So they go to meet Madame Charlie. And I don't really... She's the owner of the cafe. But she's treated as if there's like more going on here. And eventually we do find out that she can like, she gets visions and stuff. She has a really, really cool design, I have to say. I don't know the type of fish that her lower half is made of, but it's got a tail that's like almost a crescent moon and it looks so cool. She's got really dark hair with that blue highlight thing that they do in anime, but also wears like a indigo colored hood, and she has like navy blue painted fingernails and really bright blue eyes. And her overall look is just cool. I really liked it. But yeah, the Luffy and Usopp are calling her fish lady and just being like rude to her. And the whole way that Luffy acts towards them, like he says something about how do fish ladies poop, and she screams at him like, do you have no class at all? Which something about saying it that way was really funny. There's like, you have no class, and she just gets the way that she screams at him and is like towering over him, and Kami comes over and is just like, apologize immediately. And they do, but the lady's like, you really should just take them out. Charlie, that's her name. Just take a day off, Kami. Business has been slow since we haven't had that many human guests recently. And later on, we hear that, like, ever since that War of the Best, that's been a problem, that they haven't had that many humans showing up in general. This is when Kami recalls that she is supposed to be bringing clams to her pet starfish. And the fact that Papagu, I just can't believe that he is living so far off from her. And when he comes out of his place, and it turns out Brooke was already in there and spent all of this time with these like groupies and has kiss marks all over his face. And he actually says to one of them, because one of the girls is like, we had such a great time. And he responds with, like, when they say come back and visit again, he says, like, yeah, plenty of bones to go around. And I was just like, wow, show, you're really just like saying that, huh? Okay, I guess. But, and he asks to see their panties, of course, but because they're fish ladies, they don't wear panties. So it's a whole different scenario here. But anyway, the way he says too, like, I think I'm fainting, and he like slumps to the ground, and then he says, no, I'm not. Skeletons are already rigid. And I was like, again, it feels like you wanted to use a different word, but we'll just slide right on past that. Papagu says, I know you're interested in the cafe, and I get that, but it's not like it's going anywhere. Let's come back when you have your whole crew. Bone Daddy and I were just about to head back into my place. Why don't you guys come with us? If you do, you can eat all the Sea King meat you want. And he does this little bit of posturing about how he doesn't eat boring shellfish because he needs better food than that. But when Kami tells him that she's brought the clams that he wanted, he gets so excited and says that it's his favorite treat. So I don't know why he's out here just trying to pretend one thing. I can't tell if he was straight up lying to Luffy that he has Sea King, because that's sort of how Luffy reacts, as if it turns out he's not going to get any Sea King after all. But I was like, I don't know, maybe he still does. So I'm trying to jump to the spot here. Oh yeah, this is when they find out about what's going on with the guy who's in charge of the Flying Dutchman. I can't remember what his name is, because I remember it being something, didn't have the word deck in it, Vanderdeck, I feel like, something like that. And as they get going with Papagu, he starts telling them this story, and he's so excited to tell it, and then Kami just swoops in and steals the story out from under him, and he gets really, really sad. But he's like, yeah, this dude used to be really in love with the princess of the Mermaid Kingdom, and he sent her love letters every day. And he was sort of a stalker. Started sending gifts, then he started sending threats. And oh my god, I forgot about these guys like bouncing on these cushions that are in here. What a weird aside. Because his advances started to become so violent, the mermaid princess got scared, and so of course the stalker became a national concern. And then Kami chimes in, but that was just the beginning. Her father, King Neptune, got mad, which led to him sending the 3 princes you saw earlier off to hunt Vanderdecken. Vanderdecken, that's what it is. Forgot about that N at the back of it. But even with the army, they can't find him. By the way, King Neptune's the god of the sea, plus he's in control of this country. If that's not enough responsibility, he has 4 children to take care of. The mermaid princess is the youngest, so obviously the 3 princes are the older kids in the royal family. And Brooke says, well, it doesn't make sense. Still, what's going on? If he isn't a ghost, then he's like several hundred years old. And Papagu says, you're right, that doesn't make sense unless you ignore the rumors. Now, there's no denying that he existed, but the truth of the matter is the legendary captain died sometime after he arrived here on Fishman Island and hasn't been heard from since. That said, the ship you say you saw probably was the Flying Dutchman, and it's his descendant who's on board. And then again, Kami chimes in, Vanderdecken the 9th, I think he says. And I don't know what to make of this whole thing. Like, why would his descendant still be out here causing trouble the way he is? Like, just the whole thing. What happened ultimately to the princess? Like, I don't know what. I don't like it. He sounds like a real creepster. Oh my God, I forgot that we find out that older mermaids' tails split. I feel like we learned this way back, but I had totally forgotten that Kokoro, she was a mermaid, and then her tail split eventually. And we find out that like humans and fishmen interbreed all the time, and that it is a real crapshoot what their children wind up looking like, because sometimes they'll have tails instead of legs, and sometimes they'll have legs normally, and the fishier part of them will be on their faces. But yeah, the way that this works out, it ends up with them passing by this weird, like factory that has a pirate flag on it. And, the flag is a symbol of them being protected by a pirate called Charlotte Linlin, who demands candy in repayment for her giving them protection. And when Luffy tries to say, like, well, maybe she's not so bad because, like, Whitebeard protected you guys and she stepped in. And Papagu is like, yeah, but Whitebeard just did it because it was, like, the right thing to do. Like, he was trying to help. He didn't ask for anything. She's, like, caused us to build an entire factory to make candy for her because that's how much she demands. And I was like, yeah, I guess that sounds pretty shitty. And then the very last scene is Charlie going out and saying somebody has to find the straw hat because I just had a vision of him surrounded by flames. His arrival here means that Fishman Island is going to be utterly destroyed. And I have to imagine that that is actually not correct, like this interpretation. But it's going to cause a lot of people to be looking for him. He's made an enemy here just through no real fault of his own. And I kind of feel bad for that. But what can you do? Okay, I'm way over time. I got to stop. Thank you guys again for hanging out with me. Appreciate you so much. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.